Just last year, just about less than a year, we had a similar discussion. At that time, we were monitoring the progress of Hurricane Maria. So we just want to bring out the facts. Of course, lay your fares, give you the exact coordinates of this system, tell you exactly what Dominica is doing in terms of preparedness. This morning, we got the latest revised list of shelters from the local government department. Would have been sharing with you throughout the day.
My soul, yeah. Now Mother Nature said to me 3 little birds.
Quite a bit of information should come from this program.
Now I'm on my way. Anyone come to see me this day? Tell them I'll be gone for the day.
So let me welcome all the radio stations that have joined us, all the listeners via the different radio stations.
For the good Lord to pass my way.
So it looks like we can make a start now.
I'll be down by the
Let me go to Studio 2 and say good evening, gentlemen. Good evening to all of you. I know it has been a hard day, of course, but it's nice that you could come in to disseminate the information, which is so very important. It appears that they're not hearing me clearly. I'm not sure why, what is happening. So let's see if we can rectify that problem. We'll start off the discussion. Of course, we heard from the acting Prime Minister this afternoon, Honorable Reginald Austri. Also, several subcommittees have met today. And as I said earlier, we have a revised list of hurricane shelters. Of course, the plan is to disseminate all the necessary information, the facts, and of course, the plan of action should the situation get worse.
Now, Mother Nature sent to me 3 little birds singing a song.
There's a hustle and the bustle in the town today. Rushing to the supermarket to get their
now I'm on my way.
canned stuff,
See me this day.
water, batteries.
Gone for the day.
One of the basic items, key items.
waiting for the good Lord to pass my way. Oh yeah, I'll be down by the river, singing songs of joy on this lovely day. On this lovely day. Singing songs of joy. Oh, oh, oh.
Okay, it's already 18 minutes after the 8 o'clock hour. You're listening to DBS Radio. We were scheduled to begin this discussion at 6 o'clock. But of course, as I said, there was a cabinet discussion. And following that cabinet discussion, of course, the officials are now with us in studio DBS Radio. That's the simulcast that we're carrying this evening. Several radio stations are joining us on this simulcast as we discussed the impending passage of Hurricane Beryl. Let me go to Studio 2. We have with us in the studio, we have the consultant, Cecil Shillingford. We also have the acting disaster management coordinator, Mr. Fitzroy Pascal. We'll start off with him, but we also have as well Marshal Alexander, the senior Met officer. Gentlemen, good evening.
Good evening, Ivona.
Good evening, Ivona, and good evening to your listeners.
Okay.
Yes, good evening to you, Ivona, and good evening to the listeners of all the radio stations.
All right. Of course, as I said, it's a simulcast. Let me start with the disaster preparedness coordinator, Fitzroy Pascal. We are here again, of course. The season would have started on the 1st of June, but very early into the season, we are already monitoring a hurricane. Very early today, the subcommittees met, various subcommittees would have met, and the final meeting, of course, you just wrapped up with cabinet. Tell us what we are looking at in terms of preparations. What is the key item on our agenda?
Okay, like I said, good night. And as you rightly said, all the arms of NEPO have been meeting today, and we just came out from a cabinet meeting. We're doing all this in preparation for Hurricane Beryl. expected to approach the Lesser Antilles, including Dominica, particularly Dominica in our case, from any time from noon Sunday to noon on Monday. We have had several meetings. Beryl started off yesterday as a tropical wave into a depression, then a storm, and now a hurricane. So a meeting of NEPO was convened by Cabinet this morning, where we did some facilitation of the subcommittees to find out their state of readiness for the islands preparation, to determine the islands preparation. And again, we met this afternoon at 5 o'clock because we were officially placed under a hurricane watch as of 5 p.m. this afternoon. We had some deliberations again this evening with the various subcommittees, and this included the police, the fire, and members of the Ministry of Health. We did have fruitful discussions, and we again tomorrow will meet at 9 a.m. with Cabinet to discuss further the way forward.
Now, the latest advisory would have come just a short while ago at 8 o'clock, and we have not really looked at it. We have not even disseminated that information as far as what Hurricane Beryl is showing. I understood, though, that there are no really definite changes. But Marshal Alexander, the senior Met officer, would he is in fact in a good position to give us the coordinates, tell us exactly what we are looking at as far as the 8 p.m. advisory.
Well, as far as the 8 p.m. advisory goes, the system is located near 10.6 degrees north latitude and longitude 48.3 degrees west, and that is about 925 miles east southeast.
Just repeat that, Marshal Alexander.
Yeah, 925 miles east southeast of the Lesser Antilles, and it's located at 10.6 degrees north and 48.3 degrees west. And Dominica is located at 15.4 degrees north latitude and 61.4 degrees west longitude.
Okay, many people feel that it's very early in the hurricane season to start off with, of course, with a hurricane already. I mean, it's not something that's unusual. It has happened in the past. Most times, of course, we hear that the peak of the hurricane season is really in September. But, of course, with the change in the weather patterns, we can expect things like that. So, especially in terms of our overall preparedness, of course, your role as the consultant, what really should we be looking at in Dominica this time, of course, just a few months after the passage of a terrible storm, Category 5?
Well, Ivonia, we certainly would not have liked to be in that position at this time, dealing with a situation of an hurricane at this time. However, things are being put in place to ensure that the country is in a state of readiness. And for us, the main thing is ensuring that everybody's in a safe place. Hence shelters, although we are a little concerned about our shelter stock at this time. And we have the chairman of the shelter subcommittee with us, and he will speak a little more to that. But we are trying to ensure that there are adequate shelters available so that persons who would require sheltering, especially you would have people who are still under tarpaulins at this time. There are people who may have just done a quick fix on their house, and thereby would maybe not want to stay in that house and move to a shelter. But a number of things have been put in place to ensure that there is adequate sheltering. We're concerned about landslides and flooding should we have heavy rains. Although a lot of dredging operations is ongoing and has been going on since Maria, and a lot of the waterways are cleared, but we're still concerned about debris that may be lodged high up in the river, and also debris left over on slopes that could create landslides. So these are some of the major issues we want to ensure that people are cognizant of and would not have any situations. for us, a number of things which will be finalized maybe before sometime tomorrow or thereabout would be issues like shutting down. How do we proceed with a shutdown? And how do we treat schools? Obviously, if we're going to be hit sometime on Sunday, the whole question of schools would not really be an issue. Schools would be closed. But there's still a number of issues we have to try to resolve. We are understanding that radio station coverage is not good in the north and certain parts of the east, and that's not good news for us at all. We would prefer to have island-wide coverage so that the entire Dominica citizenry can avail themselves of the information that is being put out from time to time. So that is a major concern for us, and we'll see how we can address some of that going into tomorrow, Ivona.
Mm-hmm. So we keep monitoring the situation, Fitzroy Pascal, before, of course, we can look at issues like shutting down, as Cecil was saying, shutting down, of course, schools and the likes.
Yes, and that's what we have been doing. And as soon as the system was upgraded to depression, the mechanism kicked in, and we have been monitoring since then. And like Cecil said, we have been putting things in place for sheltering, which Mr. Tuse will address. We have had discussions with the police, the fire, and all the relevant stakeholders, particularly the 9 subcommittees which fall under the ambit of NEPO, the National Emergency Planning Organization.
Okay. We also have on the panel the chairman of the subcommittee on shelters. We have Glenroy Tuse. Glenroy Tuse, let me also invite you to the discussion. Welcome.
Okay, let me say it's a pleasure and a very pleasant good evening to your listeners of DBS Radio, both here and abroad. And of course, wherever you are, it's a pleasure to be with you.
Yes, Glenroy Tuse, just earlier today, we got a revised list of shelters. We have been going through this. I'm sure probably you would want to give us the latest update as far as that is concerned, and just give us a general picture as to where we are in terms of shelters and shelter management as well.
Most definitely. As you indicated, we for the last 2 weeks have published the what we call a preliminary list of emergency shelters. Given the challenges that we've had, customary we would have published all the list of the shelters, but as it relates to the challenges that we have for the 2080 season, we had to take a decision to have the list, the preliminary list, and we would of course continue to publish the names and the shelters and the individuals as that goes on. We had so far published 112 shelters. We may have to make some adjustment because there seem to have been some little challenges. So we may have to, for example, in the case of the Vikas Primary School, we may, and I want to alert the listeners that we may have to make that change to the list. That's in the north, the Vikas Primary School. We may have to remove it from the list because there's still some little nitty-gritty as far as that shelter is concerned, and that of in the southeast, the agricultural station in La Plaine. But that notwithstanding, we have published the list, and we've continued to place particular attention to some areas that are without shelters or with minimal shelters. One of the critical areas is in the South Pishley in the south, and we have since taken the decision that the PHL Secondary School will be the shelter to house the people from Pishley and also from the Jubic area. Again, I want to repeat, the PHL Secondary School in Grand Bay will host the Pishley and Jubic communities. That, of course, we've been able for the last few hours to confirm. We also have to confirm, as a challenge had been for the Layupak Sultan area, there had not been a designated shelter, but we have since confirmed with the La Flambeau, I think it's La Flambeau they call it. That shelter is designated, the La Flambeau in Layupak. It's a guest house. That, in fact, is designated for the Layupak Sultan area. Of course, we had a challenge in the Jubla community, of course. And so we have had confirmation with the Jubla Seventh-day Adventist Church. So the Jubla Seventh-day Adventist Church, and we're using the upstairs of that building for that purpose. We have also looked at the Roseau area. And the Roseau areas, it's pretty challenging in terms of finding suitable buildings to host as emergency shelters. And so we're looking at the Goodwill Primary School to help with the people in Lower Goodwill, in Roll Street and that area. And that in itself, will in fact cater for those individuals. So we, even within the last few hours, we've been looking at it. We are also looking at the Massac Primary School. For the Massac area, we are challenging the Massac Canefield area for suitable shelters. We have been, and over the last few months, we've gone seriously on a drive to identify suitable homes, and we continue to do that. And so we are looking at the Massac Primary School to serve the Checkall area, and Massac, and possibly part of Canefield as well. Importantly, we continue to call on the general public. We want to this year develop what we call a neighborhood approach in terms of sheltering, because we know of the challenges that we have as far as post-Maria is concerned. And so we are appealing to people, we are calling on people. If your structure is sound and you can take a family or two, please do that, because we feel it's important that the neighborhood approach is adopted in this critical time, in this challenging time, as far as shelter management is concerned. So we're calling on the general public. If you feel that your home is safe and sound, then you can take a neighbor, you can take a friend, you can take a loved one, you can take a family. Please do so, because we clearly recognize that we need to call on the general public. We want to continue to commend those persons who have come forward and allow their homes to be used as emergency shelters. We know that some persons don't like their names to be published, and that we respect, and that's why we're calling on people, and we respect the fact that you do not want your name to go out on a published list, but we want to encourage the general public to please, if you can, and you feel that your home is safe, you can take a family, you can take a loved one, you can take an individual, you can take a less fortunate, you can take a vulnerable family and vulnerable individual. That is okay. But we want to send a clear message as well, because since we're talking about shelter and shelter management, we want the general public to understand that in those shelters there are no beds and mattresses and food waiting for you. We expect people to come to the shelters with some supplies, at least water for a few days, or at least for 48 hours, with some foods. Secure your stuff. At least come with something to sleep for the night. Don't come to the shelter with your hands swinging and expect that the shelters are equipped with beds and food and those supplies. We are asking people when they come, at least come with something that you can at least rest for the night. And that is one of the things that we've noticed and lessons we've learned from Maria is a lot of people just simply strode to the shelters and expecting that they will be comforted with items. No, that's not the case. We're calling the general public. If you're going to the shelter, you come with at least some water, some foods, at least a flashlight, and that sort of thing, so that you can at least be secure for a few hours. We are also appealing to the general public. We are appealing to the general public. Once we have opened the shelters, people, please make the effort. Do not come to the shelters last minute when the wind begins and that sort of thing, and the rain intensifies. We are telling people that you're given a span. So at least you have to make determination that your place is not safe. Get to the shelter. This late minute thing is causing tremendous pressure on the management of those shelters when people come in at the last minute. And not only that, sometimes people come in the middle of the system itself. We are appealing to the general public, please, when you come to the shelter, please come a few hours in advance so that you can relax, you can get your base set, and not come in at the last minute to create a lot more pressure. We know for a fact that a lot more people will require to be sheltered in the event of this system. And certainly that's why we are using this neighborhood approach. That's why we're telling people, please come with something. That's why we are really looking at a collective effort in ensuring that each one help one. And that is really the approach that we hope to take, and we really want to continue to appeal to the general public. Those of you who have homes, there's a song, please take a family. If you're coming to a shelter, do not come late minute, do not come last minute. Please come with something at least to rest, as I said, and I continue to emphasize, some beds, or not necessarily bed, but something to sleep. Some food items. You secure your stuff, your belongings, if you feel that they're not safe at your home. But certainly do not come in the shelters with hands swinging, please.
Okay. Now, Fisher Pascal, what would be the biggest challenge for us right now, especially as, of course, we continue to grapple with the effects of Hurricane Maria? Shelter, of course, is a major concern, obviously. But for the ODM, what would be the biggest challenge, your main concern at this time?
Well, taking away from what Mr. Tusa said, because sheltering for us is the most important. But second to that would probably be communication. And during Maria, we saw that we had a major challenge with communication, where we had the some of the utilities like telephone providers, the telephone service provider, they got cut off. So communication would be the second to shelter. Communication would be the major challenge for us at the ODM. And we have been trying to address that, and we have put a national telecoms plan into place where we are purchasing or procuring some telecoms equipment, and where we will have communication between the Emergency Operations Center and the policy makers, and also the emergency services like the health services, the fire, and the police, and any other important stakeholders.
Marshal Alexander, what is this system showing in terms of organization? How organized is it?
Well, the system is very compact at this time. Just to give you the timeline of the system, on Thursday at 11 a.m., it became we were monitoring a tropical wave, and then at 11 a.m. on Thursday, it became a tropical depression, and by 2:30 on Thursday, it became a tropical storm. And the following morning, it was this morning, at 5 a.m., the system became a hurricane, and the reason for that was that the system was located in an area of favorable wind shear, which means there was there was less wind shear in that particular area. Most times people look at wind shear, the presence of wind shear and sea surface temperatures to determine the development of systems. But at this time, sea surface temperature is marginally favorable, which means that it is not as warm as expected. But the systems themselves also produce their own heat, because there is what is called latent heat of condensation. So even if you don't get the heat from the sea surface temperatures, then the system produces latent heat that would cause the system itself to develop. So when you have a lack of wind shear and you have the production of latent heat, then you have this system developing.
Okay, if you're just tuning in, let me welcome you. We have 4 guests, we have 4 panelists. We are looking at the progress of Hurricane Beryl. And this evening we have the Disaster Preparedness National Disaster Coordinator, Mr. Fitzroy Pascal. We also have with us the Senior Met Officer, Marshal Alexander. We have Consultant Cecil Shillingford, and we also have the Chairman of the Shelter Management Subcommittee, Glenroy Tuse. And of course, as I said, we are looking at Hurricane Beryl. Dominica, of course, under Hurricane Watch. This is, of course, still in effect for Dominica. And we're looking, of course, at preparedness.
Yes, and to mention what a Hurricane Watch means. A Hurricane Watch means that hurricane conditions are possible. And the keyword here is possible. And a hurricane watch means that hurricane conditions are possible within the watch area within 48 hours, and that is within 2 days. So that doesn't mean because hurricane watch is issued at 5 p.m. that we're expecting hurricane conditions to come aboard within the next hour or two. So
go ahead.
We would expect hurricane conditions would be possible within 2 days or within 48 hours.
Okay. Cecil Shillingford, let me bring you again. Of course, you would have done a lot after the passage of Hurricane Maria. Preparations, of course, have been put in place for this tropical Atlantic season. Several measures, of course, would have been put in place as well. I know there were several training workshops and the likes at the Office of Disaster Management. So how prepared are we?
That's a very good question. is a difficult question, but it's not a very difficult question either. The way I always sort of boomerang it is how prepared is each and every one of us. And I always say is each and every one of us being prepared will cause the whole system to be prepared. Most people seem to think it's the government that has to be prepared, or the ODM that has to be prepared, or the Met Office that has to be prepared. We all have to be prepared. And we've been on the media, as you indicated. The opening of the hurricane season, we did do a sort of a panel discussion with you. We've been updating plans. We've been printing a lot of publications and information to make available to the general public. We've been, as you indicated, training our first response team. Received the training in hazardous material management and also initial damage assessment. We've been having lots of meetings because, we are also working a recovery for Maria while we still look at preparing for this year's season. So it's quite a bit. I see right now people are being very proactive. Lots of people are heading to the gas stations because they want to ensure that their cars are filled. I'm sure tomorrow we'll see lots of people at the supermarket. So at least Maria gave them, if anything else, a little jolt to ensure that they are prepared. In terms of the situation right now, we know there's a high anxiety level. People may be getting into a state of uneasiness. I do not want to say panic as such, but more uneasiness and the whole uncertainty of the whole situation. I think people are very much concerned about that. And as I indicated, given the situation of still in the early recovery phase, there is justification in that sort of anxiety or uneasiness. We know that there are lots of people with taps still on their homes, and obviously these people will not be able to stay in those homes or in those houses if Maria continues on its current move and with the current conditions. So I know we will be seeing a lot of action tomorrow in terms of people really now paying heed to a lot of the things we tell them on a daily basis over the years. But it had to take Maria to wake them up. And I'm hoping that they will not go back into a state of slumber. And whenever there is hurricane season, and that is almost something we are short of every year, a hurricane season, that they will really put things in place and ensure that when you have situations like that, at least lives are not lost. That's the main thing, as far as I'm concerned, that nobody would lose their life as a result of any one of those systems.
Now, I want to go back to shelters and shelter management, so I want to bring in Glenroy Toucey again. Glenroy Toucey, in terms of the facts, what entails at the shelters in terms of like who opens the shelter? I would assume that's the shelter manager, right? That's the only person that have
we have assigned to the shelters shelter managers, and for the better part assistant managers, and they are in fact the ones who will open the shelters. As we speak, we have made arrangements with all the schools and all the shelters as far as the kids are concerned, so the shelters managers have been placed on alert from the time the information is passed that there's a warning, and of course we are told that the shelters has to be open. They will so be informed, but they are on the alert already, and they are expected to receive the people. What we encourage and we're doing at the shelters that we register people. Once you come in at the shelters, you will be registered. And if you come in as a family, each family member will be registered. So you will be registered as the head of the household and all your family members. And they're critical information that we will take, of course.
So registration will not just entail like getting the name of the
No, we need the name of each member
apart
of the family.
from the name, that
yeah,
you would
name
have
of the family member, whether there are any vulnerabilities, whether you have any illness, and that sort of thing. We need to capture those sort of information, because that is critical as far as the way forward in terms of sheltering is concerned. And importantly, we really want to appeal. We want to appeal, and we want to first recognize the shelter managers who have been, providing that service. It's a voluntary service, and we really need to commend them. We really want to sincerely thank them. In fact, we had a post-mortem where we had a national consultation for shelter managers, and they expressed their concerns. We did thank them for their services and their willingness and for volunteering to do that service. But they did express some concerns as it relates to the manner in which the behavior and the manner in which persons behave at the shelters, and that is why we continue to appeal to the general public. We are here for a particular purpose in the shelters, to to be safe. And what we should engage, I would believe, in the shelters is more prayer, caring for each other, praying, singing nice melody songs and stuff like that, as opposed to trying to distract and create that sort of chaos in the shelter. We want to appeal. We had said we want to be very strict in terms of security, and we are clearly had articulated the do's and don'ts. We do not expect people to come to the shelters with weapons, with alcohol, with animals and stuff like that. But certainly we will continue to appeal to the general public. Please help us. We're trying to help you to ensure that you are safe, because disaster management is all about ensuring that our people are safe. But you have to also help us as well in ensuring that you are safe and the others around you are also safe.
Fitzroy Pascal, let me come back to you again. I know you have raised this issue, and it's more or less a concern. Fitzroy Pascal, and it has to do with the dissemination of information, more so via social media. Just today, there was in fact a message that was circulating, of course, that was untrue. It was not factual. How concerned are you about this? Of course, when I say you, I mean the ODM, about this, and what would you like, the public to take as an advice?
Yes, Ivona, we continue to see this as a challenge. I mean, social media can be both good, and at the same time it can have its challenges. We had a very good offer from one of these telephone service providers today to use social media to send out text messages. So that in itself was a good gesture from that service provider. And on the other hand, we had these WhatsApp messages being circulated saying that ODM was going to close down the country on Sunday. But just to inform that ODM doesn't have the authority to close down the country on Sunday. That resides with the policy makers. So the social media can be good and it can be bad, and we will continue to attempt to educate the populace and also the media as to the best way moving forward in terms of information dissemination.
So still in Poland, let us look at the key advice again from you. What would you like Dominicans to take heed of, especially at this time? One would probably say early days still, of course, but we know how quickly, of course, a weather system can progress. What would be your main advice at this time, of course, to the general public?
Well, I'm happy they're already buying the gas, and I know tomorrow they will be going to do some shopping. One thing we would like to advise is not to buy out the whole supermarket. You only need a few things for a few days. I was trying to come in while Glenroy was on the shelters thing, that what we want people, when you go to a shelter, bring some food for up to about 3 days, food and water, and bring just your bare necessities. We do not want people to be carrying fridges and stoves and those things into shelters. So bring bare necessities, some of your valuables and what have you, but ensure that you bring in some food. There's nobody at the shelter to give you food. The system will kick in if we are, God forbid, that we are impacted on heavily. The system will kick in at a certain point to provide sustenance for people in shelters. But initially, please bring food for 3 days. If you're bringing in babies and what have you, bring the wherewithal for them in terms of Pampers and formula and juices and what they eat. And also for elderly people, you'd also want to bring in special diets, dietary foods for them. If people are on medication, we would want them to stock up on the medication as much as possible. And a few other things, again, with the high anxiety, we have to let people understand that there may be less shelters around this time, or I should say there will certainly be less shelters around this time, and we could expect more people looking for shelters because of the current Maria situation. And Glenroy did mention the neighborly approach. So people with well-constructed houses, please stick in your neighbors, and it will be for a limited period. Following the event, the state will look at what is available so they can move people into those proper shelters and what have you. I'm hoping all what we are doing is really an effort in, that will not come to fruition, so to speak. But of course, you cannot take chances. We saw what happened with Maria. We've been seeing almost the same pattern with Beryl in terms of quick sort of intensification. Not very, very quick like Maria, but at least some intensification. So we just want everybody to be on their P's and Q's. We mentioned communications earlier on. We may have some challenges with the telephone companies. Remember, they are now trying to bring the system back up. So they may be taking some preemptive action to ensure that they do not lose a lot more equipment. So they may be taking down certain things if Beryl continues. So we may lose some service. So be aware of that so that you have other forms of communicating with your friends, with your families, etc. Ensure that your telephone is fully charged, because we may also lose power. And maybe not me. We will lose power at a certain point because the company will shut down when it feels that its system needs to be protected. We have already seen announcement from the WASCO for a shutdown in the water system tomorrow evening. And what people should be doing is try to collect as much water as possible to be able to be sustained for 3 to 5 days. Quite a lot still to be done, but we can do it.
Mm-hmm. Let me go back to the issue of shelters. Glenroy too say of surely the challenges brought about by Hurricane Maria has exacerbated the situation with shelters. I mean, it's obvious that because of the hurricane we have fewer shelters, and of course we still have a lot of challenges to deal with. I mean, infrastructural damage, in some communities, that's endless for some communities to handle. How confident are you though that with this huge problem we will still be able to, to counter the added challenges that we have at this time? And what makes you confident if you are?
My confidence is in the belief that we are a loving and caring people in Dominica. I have that confidence that because we are loving and caring people, we will open our doors. Those of us who have sound homes will open our doors. As I said, we continue to make that appeal. And I'm pretty optimistic that people will open the doors to their loved ones, their families, their friends, and so that will sort of minimize because we know a lot of people will seek sheltering, in this time. And so I'm pretty convinced that we are loving people, we are caring people, we are God-fearing people, and so we will reach out to each other in time of need. I believe that, and so I'm really optimistic that given that approach, that our Dominican people will help each other, because we need each other at this time. We really need each other. And I certainly believe if that approach is taken and people, we help each other, certainly it will ease the pressure in terms of the challenge that we have in providing adequate shelters for our people in Dominica.
Now, specifically in terms of the same shelter issue, though, I know there's a plan, of course, for the provision of adequate shelters. Where are we though in terms of that plan after the last Hurricane Maria?
Place the wherewithal to ensure that the country will have some larger shelters and safe shelters. And we were hoping that at least this hurricane season would have given us a break so that we could have sunk our teeth deep into it. We are looking at some regional shelters around the country. And my hope is that there will be at least a regional shelter in every district. So we're talking about 7. And we're also looking at some other shelter facilities in communities. So it is work in progress. We've been visiting sites. We've been recommending locations, type of buildings, what is required in the building in terms of the space allocation, and things of that nature. And we're hoping that in the next couple of years or so, we could have several very safe shelters in and around the communities. The 3 that we are looking at initially would be in the Castle Bruce area, in the Jimit area, and there is one more in the Laplane area. What we are doing is we are looking at the most vulnerable areas where people would really require shelter. And so, for example, Castle Bruce would cover areas like the Kalinago territory and Atkinson Concord. It would also cover areas like Saint-Sauveur, Petite-Soufrière, and Good Hope and that general area. In terms of the one in La Plaine, it would cover Delis and some of the smaller communities around Delis and La Plaine. And the one in the Jimit area would cover the Mahu Masak area, this little community just past Jimit, Taru, and also some of the very vulnerable areas in the Roseau catchment area. So we're looking at Tarish Peat and Stock Farm and some of these Gotta Village, Fonkole, and some of these areas around. Now that wouldn't mean, because there are larger shelters, that we will not be still looking at the smaller shelters within the community. That will all be part of the master plan.
Okay, let us look at the hurricane itself, Hurricane Beryl. I know some hurricanes, of course, have similar patterns. Some are unique in their composition, obviously. What really concerns you all about Beryl, apart of course, from the fact that she came very early, or is there any major concern?
Well,
yes, Marshall.
The major concern would be for rapid intensification. But as far as the system goes, the National Hurricane Center is stating that the system is expected to be a hurricane when it reaches the islands. However, there is an area of upper level wind shear that the system is expected to encounter. And in encountering that area, we would expect that the system would degenerate, that it would be near the islands. But bearing in mind that it's expected to be a hurricane on approaching the islands and expected to degenerate after it passes the island, then that would mean that friction from the island would have been the cause of its degeneration. So as a result, a hurricane watch was issued. So we have to reevaluate and do further analysis by tomorrow and make a determination based on the model projection as to what the next step will be. Because based on the model projection, by tomorrow there could be a change. We could be saying that we could only need a tropical storm watch or tropical storm warning. So it is important that the public pay attention and listen to the weather reports and make the necessary preparations, because we are just in July and it's just the second month of the hurricane season.
And of
And
course,
the hurricane season goes up to the end of November.
and of course, according to the latest advisory, of course, some strengthening is forecast during the next couple of days, but that too could change, of course.
Yes, that's right. And most people, sometimes you look at dry air as a factor for a system being downgraded. But at the same time, that dry air could also act as a blanket that could increase sea surface temperature and result in rapid intensification.
Okay, it's 9 o'clock in the studios of DBS Radio. If you're just tuning in, let me welcome you. Of course, you have having a discussion on the progress of Hurricane Beryl. We are looking, of course, to disseminate the information as far as preparations for Dominica is concerned, the do's and don'ts, what we should do, what we should look out for, and things like that. We have with us on the panel, we have the National Disaster Coordinator, Fitzroy Pascal. We have Disaster Consultant, Cecil Shillingford. We also have Senior Met Officer, Marshall Alexander, and we have the chairman of the subcommittee on shelter management, Glenroy Tuse. And as I said, we are looking at Dominica's preparedness as we, of course, monitor the progress of Hurricane Beryl. At 8 o'clock, the center of Hurricane Beryl, we understood, was located near latitude 10.6 degrees north and longitude 48.3 degrees west. That's about 933 miles southeast of Dominica. And yes, Marshall Alexander, according to the advisory, it says that Beryl could still be a hurricane when it reaches the Lesser Antilles late Sunday or Monday. So that's what, of course, you have been explaining all along.
Yes, that's correct. And the critical time for us in Dominica would be between noon on Sunday and 2 p.m. on Monday. And the peak intensity of the storm is expected overnight on Sunday.
Overnight on Sunday. Peak intensity, of course, as you said, of the storm. Okay, let's just continue the discussion. Now, Fitzroy Pascal, yes, I wanted to look now at the overall picture, apart just from, we are monitoring Hurricane Beryl, but of course we are just an early start into the hurricane season. Officially, of course, it ends on the 30th of November, so we should not let our guards down, even if, of course, Beryl is very early, and then, some people may say, okay, maybe that's it because Beryl came early. I'm sure you'd like to advocate that the season runs officially, because it could, of course, continue after November 30. But officially, it runs until the 30th of November. And there are certain things, precautionary measures that we still have to continue to put in place.
Yes, definitely, Ivona. We have been stressing preparation and planning throughout. I think since after Maria, we have gone on this drive. The Public Information and Education Subcommittee has increased their drive also, where I think they have submitted some PSAs to the radio stations and even to put them on various websites, to include the ODM and the Med Service. We're asking the public that preparation and planning is key ahead of any impact, and this can reduce the chances of injury or any property damage to property. People should know where their shelters are. The list was circulated 2 weeks ago. The Sun and the Chronicle had this carrying. We also sent it via electronically to the various media houses. So we had that being circulated. People should plan their evacuation routes. You should have your survival kit. Protect your windows with board up with plywoods. For your branches, the branches in your area, you should have this trimmed. Check your home and your auto insurance. Check your pets and your livestock. Make sure that they're safe. Develop emergency communication plans and that sort. Have your family emergency plan in order. So we have been advocating preparedness and planning. And like Cecil said, the onus is on each and every one to be prepared in order so that the state on a whole can be in a state of readiness.
Mm-hmm. But of course, as Cecil mentioned earlier, of course, he is encouraged by the fact that Dominicans, of course, are stocking up on supplies. You too would like that as well, right?
Yes, definitely.
Because it means that people are heeding to the call.
Yes, definitely. We don't want them to overdo it, but at least they should have, like Cecil mentioned again, the bare necessities, exactly what will take them through for the next 72 hours, if at all we are impacted.
And once they have done that, we would want people to be in a safe place as much as possible. We want people to be away from vulnerable areas, especially close to the waterfront, the sea area. We would want people to be away from flooding rivers or other waterways. And we would want people to be away from areas that could be prone to landslides or land slippage, falling rocks, etc. And at some time tomorrow, a determination will have to be made about shutting down the country, and that will be done by the proper authorities, and then we will take it from there and wait out Miss Beryl.
In fact, I have a long night tonight because I just understood that Prime Minister Roosevelt's carriage is expected to come on sometime about after 10. So, of course, we will stay up, of course, and, disseminate the information. I want to go back, though, to the issue of shelters, Glenroy Toussaint, because earlier on you sort of made some changes or announced some of the changes that would have to be made on the revised list of shelters. Let us see if you could just reiterate. I know Grand Bay, the La Plain Agricultural Training Center, and some of the other locations, you have made some amendments. Let us reiterate some of the changes that you would have made and tell us exactly what they are.
Okay, yeah. As I said earlier, we have had to, during our meetings over the course few hours, we've had to do a sort of a revision. And so we are looking at the Vickers Primary School. We are not going to be using it. There are some challenges. The Agricultural Training Center in La Plain as well. And, of course, the Salisbury Primary School. So these are the three changes that we're going to make to the shelter. I know a lot of people have been calling in and asking about the shelters and that sort of thing. What I would want to encourage the radio stations to do is, notwithstanding the fact that I just from those three, the rest you can continue to inform the general public. I'm sure as I speak, I'm getting messages, you need to call the names of my shelters and stuff like that. So I would encourage the stations to continue, providing the general public with that information, because people are now calling in. I also indicated earlier that during the last few hours we have added a few more shelters. Initially, we had started with 112 of the preliminary list of shelters. That has increased. We now have, as I said, the Pierre Charles Secondary School, and that will cover the Pishley and Jubic communities. We have the Jubla community, the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Jubla, that's the upstairs. For the Layupak Sultan area, we have the La Fambeau guest house in that area. For the Layupak Sultan area, we are looking at the Goodwill Primary School for the Goodwill, Lower Goodwill area, Rose Lane and Libla Lane and those areas. We are also looking at the Massac Primary School to look at the question of the Checkall, Massac and part of Kinfield. So basically these are some of the shelters that we've added. Of course, we are continuing, as I said, to appeal again to the general public, to persons who have secured homes and sound homes, structurally sound homes, to please take in a families and loved ones, so that can alleviate the challenge that we have in terms of providing shelters, because we know it's anxiety and we would require to provide shelter for a significant number of the population. And so, as I said, I want to encourage the radio station to continue providing that information to the general public, and of course to say that we have sought in the very best interest to cover as many of the areas that are without shelters, a number of areas without shelters and hamlets, villages and hamlets, and we have sought to cover that up. And so we have at least catered for as many communities as possible in Dominica. And as I said, again, I want to encourage the stations to continue to provide that information.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, gentlemen, you'll tell us, of course, how long we will go on for. As I said, the Prime Minister will be coming in on sometime after 10 o'clock. I'm happy, of course, that you are here. We can disseminate the information. I'm getting a sense that we have about 5 more more minutes. Now, Fitzroy Pascal, of course, as we mentioned earlier, we have several subcommittees on the island which normally reports, of course, to the Office of Disaster Management. Just recently as well, the Prime Minister in his capacity also got added information from the reports of those committees, and of course, with a view to assisting where necessary, and just continuing to plan the way forward in terms of our disaster preparedness plan in Dominica. From your standpoint, how important are those subcommittees?
These subcommittees are very important, Ivona. And people think disaster management resides with the ODM, but the ODM alone cannot do it, and the ODM is just the secretariat to the umbrella organization, NEPO, the National Emergency Planning Organization. So we use these task forces or subcommittees to help us to do all the work that is required. And they are not alone. They are also the committees, disaster committees in the various communities. There's also the regional agencies and international agencies and local agencies, NGOs and private sector. So the subcommittees play a very integral part in the entire NEPO system.
Okay, it's already 10.5 minutes after 9 o'clock, so we'll begin to get closing remarks. And, of course, before we end the discussion, let us hear from Marshall Alexander as we go around the table. Marshall, your closing remarks as we end this discussion. We are hoping, of course, that you all can come back as a country. So, Marshall Alexander, as we end the discussion, let's get your closing remarks, and then we'll hear, of course, from Glenroy Toussel and Cecil Shillingford, and we'll end with the National Disaster Coordinator, Fitzroy Pascal.
Yes, at present we are under a hurricane watch, as I mentioned earlier, and tomorrow we'll be updating. So we're advising the public to stay informed by listening to the reports issued by the Met Service, to make preparations for the coming of that system. And as I mentioned again, the critical time of arrival is between 12 noon on Sunday to 2 p.m. on Monday. So the first impact from any system would be from the seas. So in the line of fire would be the fisher folks or the mariners or persons living near the coast. So the hazards involve heavy rainfall, thunderstorms, high winds. So persons are advised to make the necessary preparations to protect life and property. And you can also get information on our website, which is www.weather.gov.dm. And we also have a Facebook page, Dominica Met. So you can also access information on our Facebook site.
Okay, thank you, Marshall Alexander. Before we go to Glenroy Toussel, Cecil Shillingford, someone just called. Of course, that puts into Cecil Shillingford and Fitzroy Pascal, and he was making a suggestion if the disaster office could mobilize a vehicle, probably with a horn, and go into the various communities, especially where they have difficulty here in radio now because of what's happening with the service providers. There are some issues, of course, some challenges that they are dealing with. These challenges, of course, prevents a lot of people in various communities from hearing radio. In fact, people have been calling all day, from various communities, telling us, of course, that they cannot hear what is happening. So the caller was suggesting pre-recorded messages on that vehicle, at least something short that the disaster ODM could mobilize. I'm not sure how that could work, but it's a suggestion, and I think it's an okay suggestion.
Yeah, that sounds great. That's a good suggestion. We've been wondering how we could address that situation. Another way we can address that situation is maybe calling on the police in the area to at least go out and sound their siren, and with a public address. The siren system should have a public address system on it, and they could give the information. But we'll be having meetings tomorrow as that system creeps up on us, and we will take all these comments and advice in strides. But it's a very, very, very good idea because we've been getting lots of calls indicating that the people in the north are not hearing anything because the radio stations are not carrying all the way into these areas.
Okay, so let's get the closing remarks of Mr. Glenroy Tuse. Very interesting role that you have. One that is very challenging, obviously, but you're strong enough, Glenroy.
Shoulders. I think so. When last I checked.
But then again, you work with a team, so that's nice that we can build.
But certainly, we really want to appeal to the general public. First of all, once you have a certain that your place is not safe, please be familiar with the shelter that is in your area. And of course, do not wait the last minute to go to that shelter. Please, once the warning has been issued, and of course, we have activated the shelters, we're expecting persons to access those shelters. We also will continue to call on the general public. You know, those of you who have sound homes and your structure is, you feel it's sound, please take in a family, take in a loved one, so that will ease the burden on us, because as everyone is aware, we are really challenged in terms of providing sufficient shelters for the population that would require being sheltered in these critical times. So we really want to appeal to the general public. We want people to take it very seriously. We want us to understand that our preparedness should be on par. We should have already started that process, but certainly we have a little time so that we can strengthen what we've started. And certainly we want to just encourage the people that we want our people to be safe. That is what is first and foremost. We want us to be safe. So please be safe, people. Know where your shelters are. If you feel your place is not sound, please go to the nearest shelter that is available to you in the community. And of course, we cannot but continue to emphasize the need to call on the general public to provide that support and take in loved ones and family members, as the case may be.
True. So, Cecilin Ford, we heard you on as, by the way, this week in another capacity. By the way, again, congratulations. That time as well, you were advocating for a bus stand for the community of Bellevue, and things like that, of course, surely augurs well for the development of a community, in fact. So again, I have to say congratulations on that. But Cecil Shillingford, on another note, and on a note that we are here for, as we focus, of course, on our preparedness for the Hurricane Beryl. Your closing remarks. Of course, you give a lot of advice and suggestions and all of that. But as we end, what would you like to leave with the public?
Well, I would like to say to people, don't take this whole thing lightly. It's a very serious matter. Do all the things that have been mentioned to you. And at the end of the day, if, as I always say, if we are all prepared, then we could ride this thing out pretty nicely. We're hoping that Beryl will be kinder to us than Maria was, and at least there will be some divine intervention to where the storm may either move further north and even remain at sea, because we really, most of us in the Caribbean right now, we are suffering from the effects of last year's hurricane season, and we certainly would not want any of our countries within the region to be further affected. So again, divine intervention, and we hope that everything will work out well for us.
Fitzroy Pascal, of course, you have your work cut out for you, but it's good that there are several subcommittees and you're working for a team that, willing to assist, and it just underscores the importance of working together and, all hands on deck to ensure, of course, that we develop and continue to develop this beautiful island. Your closing remarks, Fitzroy Pascal? And I'm hoping that very soon you will come back, on as we continue to disseminate the information.
Yes, I want to thanks. And like you really said, all hands on deck. And the preparation and planning doesn't only reside with the ODM, it resides with the government, the private sector, the public sector, the NGOs, everyone. They all should be prepared. And just before I leave, I would like to probably give you some tips that we should be all aware of during a hurricane watch. Marshall said we're on the hurricane watch, so we should continue to listen to the radio, and those of us who have access to television or the social media like Facebook, check for our emergency supplies, fuel our car, and we saw that evidently at the gas station outside. Get cash in the ATM, bring outdoor objects inside, secure your building, remove outside antennas, turn the refrigerator and freezer to the coldly set in so that it can remain very cold in the absence of electricity. Store drinking water. We know that we should have drinking water for 3 days. Safe. Keep your pets in safe areas, or safeguard your pets. Charge your cell phones. We know, like, we all like the cell phones, so charge your cell phones. And finally, make sure that your hurricane survival kit contains all that you need. Thank you.
Okay, let me thank you, gentlemen, for joining us this evening. As I said, it has been a long day for you, but of course, throughout the hurricane season, that's how it is. Of course, we have to continue to monitor the weather patterns, the weather systems that develop, and the job just goes on. Of course, the season starts officially on the 1st of June and goes up until the 30th of November. So we, as a small island developing state, and this path where the hurricanes always, normally, of course, traverse, we have to be on our P's and our Q's. We have to be on guard. So let me thank you for joining us this evening. I'm hoping that very soon that we can have a similar discussion again. We can meet with some of the subcommittees and meet with some of the other committees, of course, that have been working closely with the ODM, and we can continue to disseminate the information and sensitize the public as to what they should do, especially during this hurricane season. Let me thank you again.
Welcome.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. It's already 21 minutes after the 9 o'clock hour. As I said earlier, Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit will be joining us sometime after 10. So we'll continue with the discussion. We'll continue